Hello, I hope everybody's doing well, dealing with coronavirus and everything. So, we're going to begin on our next lecture, which is chapter 1 of the textbook, and that goes over types of organizations. So, it's pretty detailed, so fair warning, it's going to be a little bit more detailed than some of the other chapters we're going to cover later on, but we're going to trudge through it together. Alright, so our first topic we're going to talk about is interest. So, CJ organizations differ from other organizations because of their interests. And interests are simply predispositions, embracing goals, values, expectations that may lead people to, or an organization, to act in a certain particular direction. So, if you're a criminal justice organization, some of the interests you may have is reducing crime, increasing public safety, rehabilitating offenders. Those would all be interests especially for the CJ system. For a non-CJ system or non-CJ organization, like a for-profit, their interests are clear because they want to represent their owners and their stakeholders and make money. And that is a for-profit. A non-profit may have interests such as furthering a social cause, increasing awareness about a certain disease or something like that, like a social cause, and then just increasing awareness and charities and such like that. That would be different interests for a non-profit. So that's one of the ways that CJ's organizations will differ from other organizations because of their interests. So we're going to continue on with going over what is a formal organization next. Now, a formal organization are juristic and artificial structures created to coordinate people and resources to achieve a broader mission or goal. So, somebody's car horn is going off. You can hear that? It's great. Working from home. So, as I was saying, formal organizations may have like legal statutes that create this program or certain laws and regulations that are created in order to bring aboard the organization. So that would be what a formal organization is compared to a non-formal. So continuing on, what are some types of formal organizations? So there's a few different types, and we're going to focus on three main ones right now, which would be your for-profits, your non-profits, and government. So a for-profit are the ones that are going to generate a profit for their owners. Non-profits, they only generate profit that goes directly to operating costs, so they don't make money. And then the government are different agencies that are given authority to do governmental tasks. And I kind of placed this nice little cartoon in the corner that goes over what the difference between a non-profit and a for-profit is. And I thought it was kind of cute and interesting to see. So we're going to go into our for-profits. So for-profits are businesses that generate a profit for the owners, like I said. There are several different types of for-profits. So this is think of for-profit as an umbrella, and under for-profits you have a sole proprietorship, partnership, and a corporation. So those are different types under that first for-profit umbrella. Think of it like a mind map, and you're breaking it down into each area. So for your sole proprietorships are for-profits owned by one single person. So these are like those self-employed businesses, stuff like that, that's only one person. So the business and the owner are the same person. So a lot of times you'll see people saying doing business as blah 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 or something like that to indicate that there's sole proprietorship. So it's important to mention about the liability that is involved and different levels of liability throughout this presentation, because some are going to be completely personally liable for lawsuits and assets versus other types of business organizations will not be. So it's interesting to look at the differences there. So for sole proprietorship, business and owners, the business and the owner, which are essentially the same thing, are both personally liable for lawsuits and for assets. So if something goes wrong and there's a lawsuit, they have to fund it out of their own money. That's what the personal liability is indicating. So next is a business association. So a business association is an association that people can conduct business through. And there's usually about 3 types of people involved inside this business association. You have your owners, you have your managers, and you have your employees. You can think of it kind of like any store hierarchy. That you're going to have your main owners, and then you're going to have your managers who manage the employees, while the owners does on top of the other 2 and such. Now, for a business association, state statutes will regulate relationships between and within your business association. So that means that there are state statutes or laws that are going to control how you can operate business. Within the business associations, you can also build relationships with outside third parties. So this is going to happen with like your suppliers for supplying products. That's what I was trying to say. Products. So you get products from third parties. You could get people doing your accounting and books and HR. All this is going to be through like a third party. So that's essentially what that would mean. So under the business association umbrella, you have several types of business associations, and the 3 main types that we're going to focus on are partnerships, corporations, and limited liability companies. And we'll go into what each of these are and how they differ as we continue on. So, partnerships can vary between the degree of their legal independence as well as the degree of owner liability. So legal independence means if they're one and the same, like a sole proprietorship, or if they are like a legally separate entity. And then like you said, with the degree of liability, it just means how much are they held liable for their actions in there. So if a lawsuit were to happen, how much of it are they liable for? So there's 2 general types of partnerships, which is the general partnership and then your limited partnerships. So your general partnership are associations of 2 or more people who carry on as co-owners. Now, for a general partnership, you can think of it as like attorneys. A lot of you, when you say making partner as an attorney, that's kind of what this means. And then there's also limited partners who contain multiple classes of partners, like some who are just investors versus some who actually co-manage and run the organization. So we're going to go into more detail about the general partnerships. So, as I said previously, general partnerships are associations of 2 or more people who carry out as co-owners of a business for a profit. They are regulated through state statutes, and it is unincorporated, which means there isn't really any paperwork to establish a general partnership. It's just pretty much you're on your own, essentially, as being a partnership. So that's what a general partnership is. So for your limited partnership, like I said previously, it contains multiple types of partners. So you're going to have your general partners who manage the business day to day. And you're also going to have passive investors who have little management authority, but they are the ones who like invest in your thing and give you money and blah, blah, blah. But they don't run the business at all. So there's usually those 2 types of partners within a limited partnership. So the general partners within your limited partnership must file a certificate of limited partnership with an appropriate state official, and that's usually your general attorney in the state. And this is just your paperwork saying that you're allowed to conduct business. Now, limited partnerships are very limited in use. They haven't been used a whole bunch according to the text and other websites. So they're not super common anymore. So, and we're going to go into our last type of partnership, which is your limited liability partnership. The limited liability partnership is a subset of general partnership that allows partners to limit their liability. So think of it as a general partnership, but you have the ability to limit how much you're personally liable for your actions. So you can have protections in which you won't lose your entire personal assets because of a lawsuit. So just means that you can control how much liability you offer with in your line of work. So that is what a limited liability partnership is. So lastly, for our for-profits, we're going to talk about the corporations. So we're going to start with a couple examples of corporations. Now these are pretty common. You probably have heard all of these, if not even more. I kind of threw up an example of these. So we got like Amazon, Morgan & Chase, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Domino's, GM, Starbucks is an example. There's a whole bunch of examples. You can easily just Google corporation examples, and there will be tons of examples of corporations. So it's nice to have little examples of what would fall under a corporation. So I provided a nice little graphic of that for y'all. So let's go into what a corporation does. Corporations are considered to be legally separate from their owners, which means they are treated as real person by the law. So you can sue a corporation, but not the people who run the corporation, kind of, in a sense. That's essentially what that's saying. So, like I said, they're treated as real persons by the law. For a corporation, they usually have a board of directors who appoints your CEO and your CFO. And remember, a CEO is the chief executive officer, while a CFO is your chief financial officer. So once you have your board of directors, you appoint your CEO and CFO who kind of run the business or in the corporation. With the hierarchies, there's even more hierarchies throughout, but that's more simply put. So creating a corporation involves filing for articles of incorporation and creating bylaws. So the articles of incorporation is like your paperwork, kind of similar to other legal paperwork you've seen in some of these other examples. So you file that, and then you have bylaws, and you adopt and create bylaws, which are essentially the rules and duties that outline your rules and your duties and your authority of the different corporate officers. So the people in charge, like what are their authorities, what are the rules, what are their duties, and how that kind of stuff. That's what's going to be found under the bylaws, and those are adopted by your board of directors and CEOs and CFOs. Pretty simple. So the last thing we're going to cover under for-profits is going to be your limited liability companies. And this is kind of like a hybrid. So think of this as a hybrid or a mix. So it's a hybrid association that combines characteristics of a partnership with a corporation. So it has the best of a partnership and a corporation mixed together. These are regulated by state laws and contract laws, so that means there could be multiple different laws that could go into effect that could regulate and control your business. So these have been increasingly used since the 1990s because of their flexibility. They provide increased flexibility because they're a mix of both a partnership and a corporation. So it's kind of a good mix. Now these are, you're going to find these where it's like attached, you see LLC. That is a limited liability company. So that would be an example of that. Let's see. They're used frequently because of their flexibility and their stocks. So interestingly, with their stocks, they're usually closely held, which means that the stock is private and cannot be traded openly on the stock exchange. So anything that's traded publicly on the stock exchange would not be an LLC usually. So the stocks are kind of kept close to the people who run the company. So people in the company have all the stocks, they trade it within their people, and that's essentially how that works out. And that would be your limited liability company. So that was for-profits and different types of for-profits. Just to recap, there are several types of for-profits, several types of for-profits, including your sole proprietorships, your partnerships, and your corporations. These all fall under your formal organizations, which are for-profits, nonprofits, and government. and several fall under your business associations and different partnerships. So everything kind of falls into different categories in umbrella terms. So we're going to move from for-profits into nonprofits. Now, nonprofits tend to be tax exempt, which means that they don't have to pay income taxes, they don't have to pay taxes on anything that they're doing. Sometimes you can even get a tax write-off for donating to them, kind of like Goodwill. So, nonprofits generate funds, but all the funds that they generate go straight for operating costs. So they kind of use their money to break even. They won't make profit off of this, make any money off of this. It's going to break even either way. Some examples are Goodwill, Habitat for Humanity. A lot of your humane societies are going to be nonprofits, animal rescues, animal welfare. Those types of things are going to be your nonprofits. A lot of nonprofits are formed for the common good or to further a social cause. So these could include religious nonprofits, it could be charitable nonprofits, scientific, even educational purposes. A lot of nonprofits can be educational. Some schools are even nonprofits for college. So that would be what your nonprofits. So when you hear about nonprofits, they're generally called Section 501c3 organizations. And Section 501c3 usually is just the term of the tax code that they are exempt for. So C3 ones would be nonprofits, while C4 is going to be politically active. So that would be like your Democratic parties, your and stuff like that are more politically active. So if you ever hear it termed as a 501c3, it's a nonprofit, and that is tax exempt under that tax code. That is a specific tax code. All right, so that would be nonprofits, and of course I gave you your little graphic with some like different types of nonprofits, so you can think of examples, because that's usually pretty helpful. So we're going to go into categories of your nonprofits. Now, these are pretty loose. As you can tell, they're either faith-based, non-faith-based, or non-governmental. Personally, I think these are I think they could have done a better job categorizing these sections. So you're faith-based, but we're going to go with it. So faith-based are like religious purposes. So there's going to be churches and other religions, and anything that's has a religious tie-in would be a religious, not faith-based nonprofit. For your non-faith-based will be secular, and they serve other purposes. So this could be education, this could be anything. And that's why I don't like this term, is because you break it between non-faith-based and faith-based when there's so many other nonprofits. But this is the way the book categorizes it, so we're going to go with that. Your last category is going to be your non-governmental organizations. And these are associations that may not fall under the other categories. So this is kind of like a catch-all. Again, not exactly the way I would categorize these, but I'm going with what it says. I would have came up with something more creative for non-governmental catch-all, but that's how that one is. So that's anything that's non-government related that's still a nonprofit. Not sure why they need a separate category for a non-governmental versus non-faith-based. So it's kind of a weird classification, but the book mentions it, so I was going to mention it for y'all. Go over it. All right. After your nonprofits, so we just went over nonprofits, and remember they're tax exempt. The last type of formal organization is going to be your government agencies. So we're going to go over a little bit about government agencies. The next chapter is exclusively government agencies, I believe. So we'll go into more detail about government agencies, but we're going to do a gentle once over so far for government agencies. Now, government agencies also get the tax exemption. This also applies, as well as tax immunity, because they're government related. So they're not for nonprofit. They're not a nonprofit, but they're not a profit either. So these refers to organizations that are federal, state, or local entities. And that kind of means you know what your federal is, state level. Local would include municipalities, county-wide, city-wide kind of things, so even smaller than statewide. And they're either elected or appointed with the authority to administer government function. And they receive their government authority through the U.S. Constitution, through state laws, and through local regulations. So they can derive their power from multiple different places, but usually it's jurisdictional in nature, in terms of you have a regulation or a state law that provides the authority to be able to do that. So the police have an authority through laws, and they're given their authority through laws, which would be an example. So some of these are the examples of government agencies. I'm sure you can think of many more. So you have like Department of State, Transportation, Treasury, USDA, Army, that kind of stuff would be a government agency. And we're going to go into more detail, like I said, in the next chapter on government agencies. But this is a brief mention of what they are. We'll go into more detail later. So lastly, none of this has been really CJ related, but our last little tie-in is going to be criminal justice related, which is going to be your CJ organizations. Now we're going to just define what a CJ organization is right now, and we'll go into more detail at a later point, especially in the next couple chapters. But since this was chapter 1, it was going over a bunch of terms. So generally, we're going to take it from there. So our CJ organization are those that are government organizations, but they have the authority to use force against citizens in policing, courts, and corrections areas. So they have the authority from the government to use force to make people listen to them. So like, you can force citizens to be law-abiding, or else you're going to arrest them. Courts, same thing. Corrections is the same. You're you're punishing them for not listening to the police in the first place, or listening to laws in the first place. So that is what a CJ organization is, and the definition that we're going to go with for the rest of the semester. Now, like I said, the next chapter will go into more detail about government organizations as well as CJ. So we're going to bring it back towards the criminal justice level, but this is a lot of information that's can apply to multiple different things and not just criminal justice. But it's important to have like a nice background, as I've been saying with the last few chapters, like through lectures, I should say. It wasn't heavily CJ, but we're going to incorporate CJ as we go along more as we further into the course. So that was our entire chapter on types of organizations. We covered a good bit of ground today. So I'm going to recap that there are multiple types of formal organizations, including a for-profit, a non-profit, and a government-related. And each of these different types, larger umbrella types of organizations, there's a lot that falls under them. So it's important to remember the different types that fall under a for-profit, a non-profit, and the government. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. So after this, we'll start chapter 2 next week. There is a quiz after chapter 1, so make sure to complete your quizzes and your discussion posts for credit. And let me know if y'all have any questions, and I will talk to y'all soon. Y'all have a great night.